with all due respect.
Recording in progress, with all due respect, episode 15. Guys, we've done 15 of these episodes, and for all 15 of them, I wish we would have had this subject covered, right? Supplements, right? For those who are familiar with, Phenom Nutrition, Mike Wines. Mike Wine has worked with us from the very beginning, from, I would say, a person we use to refer out for things bigger than what we do, right? Wouldn't that be specific, right? Has helped a lot of our clients, from gut health to supplement recommendations to the little nuances that kind of are outside of our scope, right? Almost kind of like our own little medical board, right?
Yeah, here's my textbook.
Here's
my
textbook. Our own little medical board, right?
Here's my textbook reference.
He is modest. He is modest in it, but very well versed in the supplement industries from the things you've with supplements from things you've done in the past. The reason you haven't seen him is he is in PA school, correct?
Yes.
And from my understanding, that keeps you pretty busy, right? Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about supplements. Supplements are a big deal. I don't know the number of people that take supplements, but I would say that a large percentage of our population takes supplements without really knowing what's in those and what they're doing and what the role is and what it plays. I got involved in lifting and trying to get big back when creatine first came out, and HMB and glutamine and all these things came out, right? And come to find out that like a lot of it was junk, right? A lot of the money we spent on glutamine, and I remember the articles, the most abundant amino acid in your muscles is glutamine. Take it to recover faster. And then someone was like, well, it doesn't really get past the gut. And I'm like, doggone, I spent thousands of dollars on it, right?
But it is good for the gut.
Yeah, so. It is good for the gut. Yeah, right. So it's like, yeah, what it was for and what it helped, we don't know. Or it was we didn't know that it was beneficial, but just not what we were doing with it, right? And the one thing I want to talk right off the rip, and I want to get right into it, because this can be one of those conversations that we could do this in an hour, or this could be multiple, like we could talk about it forever. A lot of people don't know what the supplement industry is. They think when they pick up a bottle that says 10 grams of creatine, or 5,000 milligrams of vitamin C or whatever, they just think, oh, they go to Walmart, they pick up the bottle and go, I heard vitamin C is good for you, so I'm just going to take vitamin C. But they don't really know the unregulation of the industry. They don't know that a lot of companies have been in trouble for putting wrong stuff in, not enough stuff in, underdosed. So I'd like for you to maybe talk a little bit about the supplement industry as a whole, what it means to be unregulated. How do we know when we're getting a good company, a good supplement first? Because I want people to understand that, like, getting the supplements online or at Walmart is not the same as getting a supplement from some of the companies I know you work with. So that's loaded, but can you just kind of give the basic rundown for people listening? What is the supplement industry? What is it not? It's a little bit of the Wild West, and kind of give us your short version of that, so we can all start people on the same ground floor of what the industry is.
Yeah, I think as a quick disclaimer, because people are potentially wondering, at least I do this whenever I hear somebody talking on social media or a podcast, I'm always like, why would I bother listening to this person?
Okay.
What's their background? So real quick, I've seen both sides of the supplement industry, meaning that I started working in it over a decade ago. I was working for a major supplement distributor and saw the whole side of kind of the fitness side of supplements. Went on to do a graduate degree in exercise phys, as you and Gray know. Took a lot of graduate level nutrition classes, biochemistry classes. So that kind of fills in some of the gaps there, and then went on to do PA school. And so if you see somebody on social media who's a doctor or a physician or a healthcare provider, and they're talking about supplements, know that their knowledge does not come from their medical training. We don't talk about supplements at all. We don't talk about nutrition at all, really, in medical training. I can't speak for all medical schools everywhere or all PA programs everywhere, as it's becoming more blended now. But just know that if you see a healthcare provider talking about supplements, a lot of that is knowledge they've acquired on their own, meaning take it with a grain of salt or look further into their background and figure out where this knowledge came from. So all that being said, this is kind of a melding of those two worlds. I've seen both the typical fitness supplement industry side and now even seeing the heavily regulated kind of supplement / drug side of the equation, because now you're seeing more supplements incorporated into medicine. So now we can kind of talk about both those sides. But initially, what you need to understand about the supplement industry is that there is zero oversight over the entire industry, absolutely none. And so that's kind of the first piece of the puzzle everyone has to be aware of. If you go to Walmart and you pick up a bottle off the shelf, there is no one double checking that company to say, yes, there is 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C per tablet that you're taking. No one's double checking that. The FDA is not involved. And so as of right now, it's just on the onus of the company. So recently, Walmart had this huge lawsuit where many of their top brands were lifted off the shelf. They were taken for third-party testing. Some of them had reduced levels of the compounds that they said were in the bottles, and some of them had literally nothing. It was sawdust. And so as an example, when you're going out and purchasing these supplements using your hard-earned money, you really want to, number one, make sure that what you're getting is actually what you think you're getting. And then what you're getting is not tainted with anything else. And so early on in the industry, one of the things that I was privy to, just because of where I was working, is I saw firsthand major lawsuits come out against multiple national, even international companies that we would all be very familiar with their names and the products that they sold. And those lawsuits came out claiming, number one, they had label spiking, meaning that what they were putting on the label was less than what was actually in the product. And then number two, they had different types of fillers, some that were inert and some that were actually potentially harmful. If they were made overseas, a lot of those companies were having additional things like SARMs, which are like steroids for people that aren't familiar, selective androgen receptor modulators. They work really well, but they're not legal. And so those were being put into supplements and sold under fat burners and testosterone boosters. So people are like, wow, these products work so well. Well, yes, SARMs do work well. That's why many of them are prescriptive. Other times it was just strictly steroids, anabolics that were put in these products. So you really want to make sure, first and foremost, the company's doing things with some sort of third-party regulatory oversight, and we'll get into how you can figure that out. And then you want to make sure that product's not tainted with anything else. Many of the big manufacturers, at least this was about 11, 12 years ago, were having different lawsuits with different products. And so certain things were basically brought out to the market and then pulled off shelves very quickly. So that's kind of a general framework to think about the fitness industry, at least on the fitness side of the equation. So when you're seeing these companies pop up overnight on social media, coming out with this brand new product, quote unquote, usually what was going on when I saw this kind of behind closed doors is those companies would kind of materialize overnight, sometimes from individuals who were fired from other companies because of legal reasons. They would make their own new companies with new and improved products. And often those companies would dissolve in a few months simply because they couldn't keep up with a competitor that they were fired from, let go from, whatever the reason. So you want to be aware of that. And then you also want to kind of be aware of, as these new companies pop up and they have, quote unquote, these new and improved things, all of these products take a huge amount of investment in terms of research and development, but then also in terms of manufacturing. So we're going to get into more of kind of like questions from people later on, but just as an example, fish oil is one that lots of people are familiar with. Lots of people take it, and it's extremely costly to actually purify the fish oil and to remove all the potential other contaminants that fish are exposed to from all the things that are dumped in waterways. And so this is part of the reason why when you get really good high quality fish oil, it has third-party testing for one, but it's also had all these contaminants removed. And when I say contaminants, I'm not trying to use the buzzword toxins that everybody loves on social media. I'm talking about things like PCBs and dioxins, glyphosate, which is Roundup, it's a pesticide, heavy metals, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, lead, all these things get into the waterway. And so they can show up in fish oil. And then the testing that takes place for that fish oil is once it's been manufactured, stored, and then distributed, it has to be in a relatively temperature controlled environment or it oxidizes, meaning that when you take that fish oil, it actually generates an inflammatory response. Normal fish oil should be anti-inflammatory. So all those steps in the process, all that removal of contaminants, all that third-party oversight, all of those are independent players in the production process of fish oil, and they all have to get paid by the company, and then the company has to pass on those expenses to consumers. So this is why when you see a certain fish oil brand that's really, really cheap, cheaper than anyone else in the market, you need to have all of these things in the back of your mind. Yeah, there's probably a reason why it is so cheap. It's not like they're doing anything different than anybody else. They're just leaving out all the other necessary steps that are protective safeguards for you as a consumer.
$15,000 Mercedes probably isn't a Mercedes, I guess. Right. And then I know you've talked a lot of times too before, questioning things like proprietary blend.
Yeah.
Right. It's a great way of marketing our secret formula that works better than everybody else. So secret that we don't want to tell anybody what it is. When we see that word, and this is something you taught me, and I almost don't buy anything that has a proprietary blend anymore. Right. I really don't do a lot of supplements anyway. I think I've become a cynic, but, when people are concerned about words like proprietary blend, explain what that means to people.
So you look at a label and everything is listed on the label in the order of quantity. So the first thing in the label is going to be the highest quantity, even in a proprietary blend. So you got 1,000 milligrams of whatever, vitamin C, collagen, curcumin. So if it's listed in that order, you've got the highest amount of vitamin C and then collagen and then curcumin. Makes sense. So what I have seen some companies do, which is why I'm kind of middle of the road with proprietary blends, is I have seen some companies that they manufacture a product. I've used the product when it was all individually listed ingredients, so I know the exact amounts that were in there. The product got popular, and then they made it a prop blend with the exact same amount of ingredients. And then when you add together all the individually listed ingredients, it's the same amount of milligrams as the prop blend. So I have seen that take place with very high quality companies that I can send them an email and get the certificate of authenticity or the COA for the product from a third-party lab. So that's where with certain, at least individual products, I might be okay with a prop blend if I've seen the original product manufactured. However, with most products with most companies, what they'll do is they will list those ingredients. They will give you the general overall amount, but what they'll typically do is they will slide in cheaper ingredients next in line, and they will tend to dilute the more efficacious but more expensive ingredients that are listed first. So as an example, you might have something like methylfolate, which is basically a really bioavailable form of folate, which is typically in multivitamins and things like that. And so if you're going to take a really high amount of that, it's extremely expensive. And so sometimes people will sprinkle it into like a B complex, and it'll have some methylfolate, not a huge amount per serving. And that's their way to basically pad the label so it looks larger with more ingredients, but the overall relative amount of the ingredient and the physiologically relevant dosage is how I typically describe it to people, meaning the amount you need to take to actually change something in the human body is not that large. And so that's the issue with prop blends, that people will quote unquote hide things in there, meaning they'll put less expensive, more inert compounds. They're not going to necessarily hurt you, but they're going to reduce the overall efficacy of the things you actually want. And so some companies base their marketing on this and say, we'll never do a proprietary blend. I like that. I use a lot of companies like that. But the flip side is, I will say there's one or two products that I have seen them switch over to a prop blend as they've gotten more popular. And I still use it because I know what was in the original formulation.
Yeah.
And I am in contact with the owners and those sort of things, so I could always reach out.
Yeah, you've been privy to some of that, so you kind of know what to look for. Yeah. What I see a lot in the industry is research will come out that X supplement or X product, or I guess an ingredient is very good, right? If someone be like, oh, they'll read an article that says, you know, vitamin B helps keep you from getting sick, right? And someone's like, well, I need vitamin B.
Right.
Well, then somebody puts out a vitamin B product and they say, based on research, helps keeping you from getting sick. So then our simple little brains go, right, it's going to help me from getting sick. And they don't look at what they forget to look into is, I mean, I believe this happened early on with like glucosamine and chondroitin. when it came out, that glucosamine helped like decrease symptoms from arthritis and decrease inflammation, and actually make you grow back cartilage or something. I can't remember what it was.
Right.
And so they come out with this product, but what they forget is they forget to read later on. They say, well, one, how much of that product, right? If it's 1,500 milligrams and your product only has 300, do I have to take it 5 times a day? Well, to take it 5 times a day, that bottle lasts me 5 days, right? Or what's the quality of the product? How do I know I'm getting the quality of the product, right? So, and I understand people when they say, well, because research is hard, research is tricky, reading research is hard and tricky. Yes, vitamin B might help keep you from getting sick, but at really, really high amounts, and what's the product? And it's really expensive if you do that much. And the supplement industry does a really good job kind of
Fear mongering.
fear mongering us, swaying us, right? I guess. And I see that a lot in the supplement industry, and that's just, later on. So we talk about we've talked about, hey, what is the industry? It's unregulated. What you see is not always what you get. There's a lot of marketing in the supplement industries. The next one is, if I do want to take supplements, what are the things I need to be looking for? What are some marked characteristics of a good supplement company for the person who is listening to this and be like, hey, there are some things I would like to try. What are some things I want to look at from a company? What should be what should be good? What should be on the lookout? How do I even identify a good supplement company?
Yeah. And I think somebody who's asking that question is probably 5 or 10 steps ahead of the average consumer, because most people are just thinking along those lines that you just stated. I saw this commercial saying this supplement helps with X, Y, or Z. I have X, Y, or Z, so it will obviously help me. Kind of that deductive reasoning, A plus B equals C. And so the interesting thing is supplements and medicine, like the supplement industry and the medical industry, are really not that different in their marketing tactics. And the only reason I bring this up is when people are asking these sort of questions, they need to understand that it's kind of the same sort of spin in the supplement industry that the pharmaceutical industry does. So America is only one of 2 countries that allows direct consumer marketing of drugs. Us and I believe Finland is the other one, or Norway, I can't remember. And so the interesting thing is it's the same sort of rationale as, oh, you have eczema or psoriasis. If you take this drug, you won't worry about your skin when you're out on this date with this person. You'll have a great time, blah, blah, blah. Well, the supplement industry does the exact same thing. And it started with kind of Schwarzenegger back in the day, take this supplement, look like Schwarzenegger, and it's progressed. And so now we see that kind of coming full circle with your example. If you take this vitamin, it'll influence your immunity. And we saw this especially during COVID. You take zinc and it's going to boost your immunity. Well, the thing is, we have this very simplistic mindset of all zinc is the same. Doesn't matter on the type of zinc, the amount of zinc. And so we've kind of tried to simplify it as much as possible. And human biochemistry doesn't work like that at all. So the first thing you want to be thinking about is you're going to have skeptics who say, well, supplements don't really work that much. Well, what I will tell you is that the FDA is now looking at hundreds of different supplemental over-the-counter compounds that they want to introduce legislature to regulate now, so that the average consumer will not be able to purchase them. For example, you can't purchase melatonin in Canada and Australia. It's a prescription. So that's just a very simple example, but things like N-acetylcysteine, things like curcumin, things like certain forms of B12 and B vitamins that people find very helpful for different everyday symptoms, those are now kind of falling under the FDA's watch list, so to speak. So when people tell me that supplements don't work, I often ask if they've ever been prescribed vitamin D or a B12 shot from their doctor. Because if they have, then the supplements that your doctor's giving you aren't going to work either, right? Because it can't be both. You can't have supplements that don't work, except for the ones your doctor prescribes you. Those work.
Good old logic.
So it's either one or the other. And so if your doctor's giving them to you and your vitamin D is going up in your blood, clearly it's working. And I can tell you vitamin D that you get without a prescription also works too. So that's kind of like the first step of the puzzle, understanding that the FDA is aware of these things. These things do change human physiology. So now we move past that. So then it's kind of like there's 1,000 supplement companies. Where do we go with this? The first thing is, can you email that company on most any product that's at least more expensive, for example, let's say CBD, fish oil, even things like certain multivitamins that are more expensive because there's more things in them, can you email that company and immediately get a certificate of authority? Meaning that some sort of lab that that company is not affiliated with has tested that product and said, this is exactly what's in the product. This is the amount of what's in that product. This is what's not in that product. If you can't get an email back, or you don't get any response, or customer service says, well, here's our in-house testing that took place, that would make me a little bit more suspicious. The second thing is it a fairly large, well-established company? Has it been around for years and years and years and years and years? For example, Optimum Nutrition. Everybody knows ON. You know, that brand's been around for years and years and years. 10 years ago, when I first got into the supplement space, whey was one of the top, probably still is the top product that's
I think it is. Yeah.
and so you had like basically 3 distributors of whey protein to all of the supplement manufacturers. And so one of the biggest ones was, I think it was Glambia. And so they're one of the major manufacturers. So they did like BSN, they did ON, they did a number of these other companies. And the chance of them skimming off the top, quote unquote, adding things to the whey or kind of cutting the whey with other things, like, for example, if you had creatine into whey, it makes the protein count on the label look higher because it is a, in laboratory testing, it shows up as a similar form as amino acids. And so you can do this with, like, for example, you can add in glycine, which is an individual amino acid. So the protein count goes up, but the actual amount of usable amino acids that would be in a typical whey blend aren't the same. And so it's a cheaper way to kind of spike the whey. They were doing this with glutamine too, back in the day, like you were talking about. So the chance that a major manufacturer for like all of these major supplement suppliers is going to do that is extremely low. So the overall length of time the company's been around is another thing. And then usually if you're finding companies through social media and they've got, what's the best way to put this? And they've got influencers, as an example, that are heavily marketing their product, the odds are that brand is just kind of breaking into the scene, or they're looking to kind of cut out the bottom of the market with their marketing, meaning that everything's kind of priced the same with the cheapest product. And so they just want to look like the best option because so-and-so influencer or celebrity is supporting them. And so that would kind of be another thing, that the best brands typically don't have to rely on influencers, celebrities, these sort of things to push their product. They're just like, hey, here's our product. Here's what the data says. Here's what's in our product. Do you want to use it? Yes or no? And the vast majority of time, those sort of manufacturers are then working with healthcare providers who are then working with patients to say, or let's say coaches. I know of some brands that will utilize fitness coaches, and they'll say, if you're working with individuals who are interested in enhancing their performance, their health, their sleep, whatever it is, body composition, here's our products. They work. We stand behind their quality. It's up to you whether or not you want to use them and recommend them. We're just here. The flip side is the company that's like, look at our product. It's so great. We've got X, Y, or Z personality supporting us. They're telling you how great it is. Believe us. That's a completely different side of marketing versus here's what the data says. You can decide if you want to make that leap, so to speak. So that's kind of a roundabout way to answer the question, but I hope I kind of addressed it.
No, I get it. I know me and you had a recent conversation about someone I knew that was looking for a magnesium supplement, and one of them was a magnesium supplement from Kroger, and one of them was a magnesium supplement from Thorne. And it's like, wow, that's like triple the price. And I'm like, well, Thorne's a reputable company that's probably doing it the right way. If you want something good, you're going to have to pay for it, right?
And here, great example with Thorne, just from a price point perspective, when you look at Thorne's products, they have a normal line and then they have an NSF, meaning like certified safe for sport, that there's nothing else in there that would ever get you popped on a doping test. To have an NSF certification on one product, it's like $10,000 or $20,000 a year for a single product. If you have an entire product line that's NSF, well, you're probably paying upwards of $500,000 to make sure that NSF stamp just stays on that product. Well, that cost has to go somewhere. So just
you're paying for it. No, and you're paying for it. So, all right. So we covered, hey, what is the industry anyways? The wild, wild west, right? How do we know a good company, right? I really like the idea if you can email them and get their third-party testing. I think that's pretty important, right? So then you get somebody saying, it's like, wow, it's hard to find a good company. It's probably not at Kroger. It's probably, pretty expensive. I got to do all this research to make sure I'm getting a good company. The next question is, where on the importance does supplements lie? Like, I hear people say all the time, well, I took X supplement and it made all the difference in the world, right? Or I just can't make it without my melatonin, right? You hear that all the time, right? Which I really changed my view on melatonin based on our conversations, right? More of an intervention, not really a everyday thing, I guess. Um, in the role of health and fitness and feeling better, getting stronger if you want the performance side, or just being healthy, how big a piece of a pie is supplements in that, right? And I know, again, I know the real answer is, well, it depends on the person and if they got their blood levels checked and if they're low. If you have really low vitamin D can really make a big difference, right? But for the general population person who's considered healthy, if that even exists in the United States anymore, I don't know if it does. Well, how big of a piece is supplements in the total health? Like, do you have to have it?
Can I potentially add to that, asking, how do you know how much you might need?
Right. There's three pieces to this puzzle. First being, somebody would argue no one needs supplements, which I would say that's probably that person hasn't necessarily looked at the research on kind of how crop science has changed and nutrient levels in food has changed. The second piece of the puzzle is someone fills in the gaps. And they kind of are, like Gray was saying, well, I need a little bit of this, but not as much of this. The hard part with that is you can test all of these different things in your blood and see what you do and do not need. Insurance will never pay for it. And the current means to test these individual markers that correlate with certain vitamins and minerals and nutrients, not all of them have been validated, meaning that there's some things that are validated. You can test vitamin D, you can test vitamin B12, but for example, testing serum vitamin B12 does not necessarily tell you whether someone is actually in need of that nutrient or they have enough. So as an example, your vitamin B12 can be super duper high because we literally just tested your blood, but you could have taken a vitamin B12 supplement the day before. Just because it gets into your blood does not tell us if it actually gets into the cell. So there's another test that you can run called methylmalonic acid, and it actually uses B12 as a cofactor to break down methylmalonic acid. So if you don't have enough B12, you can't break down methylmalonic acid. Methylmalonic acid goes up in the blood. So that's where if somebody says, well, I tested my B12 and it's fine in the blood. Well, that is true, but you also need to make sure that that B12 is actually going where it should be going and then processing those reactions. So this is where it gets very complex from a biochemical standpoint. And you can't just say, oh, because I'm taking X amount of this, then I know that I'm good. So it's a bit of an art and a science. That's the whole gist of kind of medicine and also health in general. So the third piece of the puzzle is there are probably certain supplements that people take that they could potentially offset their need for depending upon their lifestyle. If you work night shift, I will just tell you, you will likely improve multiple facets of your health if you're going to use some supplemental melatonin to sleep during the day. We just know that you're going to make most of your melatonin at night. You're going to shift your circadian rhythm. And that's probably that. And someone who has like jet setting between different countries and jet lag, they're probably going to need melatonin to shift their circadian rhythm and enforce sleep in the time when they have to sleep, whether that be during the day or late afternoon or whatever it is. So there's probably certain stipulations for certain types of people. And so this supplement conversation is very nuanced. And I always approach it this way because I hate absolutes. I always tell people, if someone's speaking in absolutes, you probably want to back away quickly because they're not always respecting the biochemical individuality of people. And so if you're eating a varied and diverse diet, which is the first thing, those are the people that have less supplement needs. Varied and diverse, meaning that you're probably, the research shows you're eating upwards of 30 plus different types of fibrous fruits and vegetables or fibrous foodstuffs that could be starches, tubers, legumes over the course of a week. So if you're thinking back in the back of your head, 30 different types of foods that have different types of fiber in them, well, that gets pretty tricky. A lot of people might eat kind of single things.
No, that ain't me. I ain't getting 30.
Right.
Yeah.
Steak, potatoes, and green beans. All right, so you got potatoes and green beans with one meal. So that's two things. So the next day you got to eat different things then. So think about it. You got to eat 5 different types of foods all 7 days of the week to roughly get over your 30 amount. So that gets a little tricky. I'm not saying you then take a huge variety of probiotics and other things to offset that. But what I am saying is that that's the foundation. So if most people aren't doing that, then we need to ask questions. What would this person likely benefit from? I call multivitamins health insurance. I always tell people, in general, they're not going to hurt you. The vast majority of multivitamins don't have high enough amounts of fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K for you to ever become toxic on them. And the water-soluble vitamins, you will simply urinate out. And so in general, most people should be on a high-quality multivitamin. What does that look like? That means you're probably going to have to take more than 1 capsule per day. Most people want the Centrum Silver. They want the 1-a-day men's or the 1-a-day women's. You can look at those, and I will tell you right off the top of my head, they use the cheapest forms of most vitamins. For example, when you look at a multivitamin complex, your quickest tip-off is going to be look at the zinc and look at the magnesium. If they use zinc oxide and magnesium oxide, that's the cheapest form. Those forms aren't well absorbed in the GI tract. And it's going to tell you about the rest of that supplement in terms of the manufacturer and whether or not they actually care about the consumer more than the bottom end of profit. The third thing you can look at along with zinc and magnesium is generally the B12. So there's 4 different types of B12. The one you want, or the one you don't want is cyanocobalamin. The other 2 forms are methylcobalamin, adenosylcobalamin, and hydroxycobalamin. So just remember, if it starts with a C, cyanocobalamin, it's a C, it's almost failing. You don't want that. So those are kind of your 3 tip-offs. Look at the B12, look at the zinc, and look at the magnesium. If they use cyanocobalamin, zinc oxide, and magnesium oxide, it's pretty cheap. You can take it. How much of that are you actually going to absorb? Not a whole lot, and especially not in 1 capsule. So it's going to be more than 1 capsule, usually anywhere from 2, sometimes up to 6 if it's a really good multivitamin. And it's going to cover all your micronutrient needs such that if you aren't eating a varied and diverse diet, you're traveling, you don't have time to cook, whatever the reason, you know that you're kind of backfilling those things. And so someone might say, that doesn't even matter. I've lived 35 years, 40 years, and I've never had a problem. Well, that's true. But most people you talk to nowadays have some sort of dysfunction or dis-ease, if you want to call it that way, in the form of, oh, I can't sleep well, my joints hurt, I'm bloated. And keep in mind, every single chemical reaction in your body all requires micronutrients as cofactors. For example, when you want to go to sleep at night, you need melatonin. And people say, well, I take melatonin. Well, that's true, but you synthesize melatonin from an amino acid called tryptophan that you get out of protein you eat. That tryptophan converts into 5-HTP and serotonin and then melatonin. But through those 4 steps, you need zinc, you need B6, you need magnesium, you need selenium. So all of those steps, like a waterfall, are not going to cascade efficiently without all those cofactors. So a lot of times people start taking a multivitamin, a good quality one, and they'll be like, wow, that's weird. My energy's better. I get tired at night. I'm sleeping through the night easier. What's going on? You're just pushing on all those normal biochemical cascades that help your body to function at its best. And so that's kind of the first step, is getting a good high quality multivitamin, checking the ingredients. That's how you can know whether it's quality or not. It's probably not going to come from a big box store. That's the other thing I'll tell people. The vast majority of supplements that are good, you're probably not going to find them at Walmart, CVS. The other thing with Amazon, I will tell you that I've talked to multiple companies who do their own testing in-house and also send off their products. And they have found that their products are being sold on Amazon and they're either expired or they're completely counterfeit. And so I've seen this where it's not even things like multivitamins, but it's like, for example, everybody's into gut health now. I've seen certain GI products that are extremely expensive in like liposomal liquid forms that are very easily bioavailable. And the company will buy that product that supposedly is from them, and it will basically look the same, it will taste the same, and it will have 0 active ingredients. I just saw this for a peptide manufacturer as well. Same product, same bottling, same capsule color, and they come to find out with raw material testing, there's nothing in it. Wow. So that's why I always warn people. You may say, oh, I'm getting off Amazon, it looks the exact same, it's stamped, it's got an expiration date, it's the same labeling, the same shrink wrap, the same packaging. Doesn't matter. It's all becoming part of that kind of counterfeit space now where people can make money. So lots and lots of things for people to think about with supplements, but this is all the stuff happening behind the scenes, many consumers are just seeing the marketing that's forward facing. Take the supplement, it helps with X, Y, or Z, amount, quality, sourcing, counter. You got to be thinking about all of these things.
One trick I've used with people who snack late at night, and this is coming from you, snack late at night and have a hard time sleeping, is we're giving them a breakfast, a ridiculously high protein breakfast to help with, one, they snack less at night. Well, I do two things. No food for 2 hours before you go to bed, big breakfast. So one, they don't snack and get the extra calories, but then eating less and giving themselves 2 hours, they actually sleep better, but the hunger is less because they have a high protein breakfast, but also the high protein breakfast from an amino acid and a tryptophan and a melatonin also helps with sleep. So I'm kind of double dipping, helping them not eat as much at night, start their day in an anabolic phase with high protein, but then also sleeping it better at night. All the great things of eating a high protein breakfast. When you're looking at the hierarchy, if they were looking at a pyramid, and you break that pyramid, where does supplements, is it just the very peak of the pyramid of supplements? Is it like, exercise and nutrition, exercise first, or sleep, exercise, nutrition, and then the very peak is supplements as far as the impact? Where would you put supplements in that hierarchy?
I would probably say if someone is dealing with an acute deficiency of something that is known, refilling that deficiency would kind of be bottom tier, along with adequate sleep,
That's
a
fair.
varied and diverse diet, and some sort of movement. If someone is low vitamin D, you have to ask the question of why they're low vitamin D. But for some individuals, they either don't synthesize it well through the skin, or there's an issue with this process in the kidneys called hydroxylation, which is how you convert vitamin D to its more active form. So you can have all these different things behind the scenes, but if you know it's not there and it's lacking, for example, if somebody's a vegan and they're super anemic, well, then giving them iron, if they're not going to change their diet, is priority number one. Like, you can do
That makes sense.
right, it won't really matter. Like, it just won't. That's too big of a gap that you're creating in their physiology, and too big of a disruption.
I want to start this question off with, like, we're not prescribing anything here. We're not giving, this is not, don't confuse this with medical advice. We want people to just start the beginning research of understanding what are good companies, what to look for, what you need, and just educate people on the industry in itself. And we also have talked about this, the really only way to know what you need is through blood work, right? To really know. Right now, okay, you're shaking your head. What's the first thing that popped in your head when I said that? Like, yes, no?
I guess initially, if you're just looking for like confirmation of like, yes, no, I need it, with certain things, maybe vitamin D being one. But I think there's other things that, like, you can go off symptomatology. Like, for example, can you test melatonin? You can test it in serum and you can test it in urine. It's hard though, because it's got this diurnal curve throughout the day. So when do you test it? What's the relevance? How quickly does someone metabolize it through so there's so many other steps where it's like, if someone isn't sleeping well, do they have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep? Okay, staying asleep. All right, so melatonin is not the solution to that. Melatonin helps you fall asleep. So that's where you can kind of work backwards from symptoms with some things that I'm not always a test everything kind of guy, because it just gets cost prohibitive.
100%. I agree. Yeah, 100% agree with that. I don't need blood work. If you can't fall asleep, I don't need blood work to say melatonin might not help you. Right.
That's bigger. That's a bigger symptom. It's a noticeable symptom.
Right. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
I don't need blood work to tell a 25-year-old kid who wants to start gaining weight and getting stronger that creatine is going to benefit him. I don't need your blood work. First of all, we can get into the creatinine conversation and doctors and all that. But if there's anything that's ever pissed me off more, it's when I get a 25-year-old kid who takes creatine that lifts weights, gets blood work done, and the doctor said he's in kidney failure or whatever. And I'm just kind of like, your creatine line low. It makes me want to shoot people. But if you're, and we've had this conversation, right? They just don't know, right? If you're someone that wants to look at taking supplements and you're like, hey, I want to just overall my health, right? Obviously, we're not going to say to, go jump to this supplement or this magic thing, but do we start with a multiple vitamin? Do we start with a guy who lifts with whey protein and creatine? Do we talk with somebody about, if they just want health, to a multiple vitamin and maybe some vitamin D? I mean, where do we, and again, we're not prescribing, we're giving people the beginning of doing your own research. where do, like, if someone comes to you, like, where do you start?
I honestly go off of, rather than just saying like, these are my top 3 supplements for everybody, I generally go off of asking people, number one, like, what's your goal? And so for some people, they're like, well, I feel fine, but I just want to feel even better. Like, I just want to, they're in the optimized crew. Okay. So then we kind of move past the whole, are you deficient in something? Then we kind of get into the whole nootropic space. We get into kind of the brain optimization throughout the day, sleep optimization throughout the night. And that's a whole different conversation, because now we're past the kind of medical, I have this symptom, make it go away so I can get back to just normalcy. So that's kind of the one crew. And a lot of that is fitness people, because they're in the upper tier of health because they're doing a lot of the foundational steps correct. Okay, so then we kind of can really dive into the nitty gritty, and this would be where you can potentially even go into more of the specialized testing, where you might want to get like a DEXA scan to look at like body composition. And then, hey, if I take this supplement, for example, let's talk about men's health. There's good data on certain things that you can take that will raise testosterone upwards of 10 to 15% of your current level. So for example, somebody's like, well, yeah, but it's not the same as TRT. Well, correct, because you can take somebody with a testosterone of 200 and you can make them 1500 with their TRT dosage. I'm talking about
In a hurry.
Yeah,
In a hurry.
You can take somebody who's like 500 and you can boost them up, let's say 120 points. Well, that doesn't seem like a huge amount, but if it's all going into free testosterone that's in circulation, that's going to make a big difference with sleep and recovery and everything else. So it's not like we have to talk prescriptive. That's all over the counter things. And I can literally send you the research showing a 120-point increase over the course of about 6 weeks in males who are young and healthy. So there's things like that that you can really get into the weeds with. So that would kind of be the first set of people. The second set of people would be those who are like, well, I'm not diseased, quote unquote. There's no diagnosis, but I just don't feel well. So for example, I worked with one middle-aged female. She was in her early 40s, late 30s, something like that. She had loose stools. She had poor sleep. Some of her hair was falling out. She wanted to get pregnant and have her second child with her husband. For whatever reason, she had just been told she was infertile by her doc. So I didn't go after any of those things. It was just more so, hey, tell me what you're doing, and then let's kind of work to augment your lifestyle and nutrition. And then
what a wonderful conversation so many people wish they could have with their doctor.
Yeah.
Right. Don't you? I mean, instead of just like someone be like, I'm actually going to do a post about it. I've had 3 people that have come to me about nutrition coaching recently that said, I went to my doctor and he handed me a pamphlet on the Mediterranean diet. That's all he did. You just don't have that conversation. But go ahead. I'm just saying, what a great opportunity to have a conversation with somebody if you know what you're talking about.
Right.
With what you did with that person with the hair falling out and all.
Right. So she had been, and again, full disclosure, this person, I was not in PA school. This was not medical advice. We were sitting down to have a conversation. I explained my background and said, this is all just information. Take it for what you will. That's how I function. I basically just offer to sit down with people, talk through everything and say, here's options to consider. You decide what you want to do. I'm just here. And so we basically talked through the process. She had been worked up by her doc. He just said, you're stressed out. You probably just need to take some time off your job and take a step back. Well, anyways, this individual was also a salon owner. And so the other thing we had to talk about was exposure to things as a salon owner. So this is where we start to get into environmental medicine, if you want to call it that. Environmental exposure is basically the bigger topic of that. And so now we're talking about things that disrupt thyroid function, things that disrupt fertility. Again, we talk about the supplement space, but I will tell you the cosmetic space and the beauty space, hugely unregulated, like tons and tons and tons of products that, number one, have either heavy metals in them, but some of them have like radioactive compounds in them, that once they are produced overseas, no one's regulating that. It just gets shipped here. So again, the beauty space, people that work in that space, the salon space, the hair space, large environmental exposures. So for this person, some of the things we did was obviously work on just foundational lifestyle things with sleep hygiene, getting them, and then those things didn't really work. So then we had to backfill nutrients that we know probably affect sleep: magnesium, zinc, trying some melatonin. You can try things higher up in the cascade, 5-HTP, tryptophan, making sure they get enough protein, all these basic foundational tenets, giving her I think we gave her 5 products. One was a probiotic that we knew improved microbial diversity, and she had her loose stools resolve in seemingly a week, 10 days. And then we gave her a multi, we gave her one thing for sleep. Her vitamin D was low from her doctor. And then I believe we gave her a little bit of an adaptogen complex to help with her stress response, to help with her energy levels. So not rocket science, averaging probably 100, 120 bucks for all those things. Some of them lasted 2 months, some of them lasted 3 months, because people want details on how much does this cost. And so that's about what you're looking at for some people. We did that. We kind of talked for maybe a month, 6 weeks back and forth on different things, and subsequently didn't hear anything back. And so after the 4-week mark, she was like, I have no more loose stools. I'm sleeping better. Well, then 3 months later, she sends me a message and she's like, hey, I've lost 20 pounds. I'm not even doing anything differently. I'm working out less. I'm spending less time in the salon. I started using the sauna like you were talking to me about, because I know that helps get rid of a lot of things I'm exposed to. Started sitting out in the sun more. And now I'm going to bed much earlier. And because I've finally backed off of my work stress, my overall stress in life has gone down, blah, blah, blah. 6 months later, she sends me another message. She's now pregnant. She's a month into her pregnancy, and then she ends up having her child. Everything's healthy and well. She's doing great now. I don't know. I don't keep up with people. My goal is not to, make people lifelong relying on me. It's just like, here's what may be there. Use it if you want. You got better. Awesome. Have a wonderful life.
How much better is that than somebody giving her Ambien, an SSRI, another medicine? I mean, how much better is that than all that, right? Like, a guy on Twitter has these funny posts. He's like, I dare you to go to your doctor and tell him you're managing depressive issues. Get ready to run down the gamut of medicines like crazy, like kind of like get ready, right? Because they're going to hit you with, all these. A lot of doctors will say, oh, you can't sleep, here's Ambien. Oh, you're having stress, here's antidepressant, right? Which I'm not, they have their place, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how many people would address like, well, what are these other things, right? And just those 5 little things made such a huge impact in her, right? So yeah, I guess what you basically just answered that question. What impact can it have? It can have a huge impact if you're that person.
Mm-hmm.
For some people, for the majority of people, I think we're looking for like you said, the nootropics, the higher performance stuff. I take, is whey protein a supplement? Some people say it's a food. What do you call it, Mike?
It's processed. So
okay, yeah. Okay, so I take whey protein. I do 10 grams of creatine a day because they say 5 to 10 is good, and I said, well, 10 must be the best then. Right? That's just my brain. That's just my brain, bro. Yeah, work with me here, right? 5 to 10, well, 10's awesome, right? Magnesium at night, zinc at night, and melatonin if it's been like stressful. Like I usually, when I use melatonin, I use melatonin on the nights I do jujitsu. I don't come home till 9.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because I'm already geeked. I have to eat, and I know I haven't had that relaxed time to like just pump the brakes.
Right.
So I use it on the jujitsu nights. And that's all I use. Mm-hmm. We ready for rapid fire supplement questions that people gave us? I think there's 5 or 6.
Yeah, sure.
Some of them you already answered, which means that a lot of people have the same questions, right? Are multiple vitamin products even effective? Recommend for a daily vitamin stack? I think we answered that, right? Now you've changed your thoughts on this. Mike of a few years ago used to say, "Don't worry about a multivitamin." Years ago.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Yeah, years ago. This is. You gotta remember, I've known Mike forever.
Pre-me. This was pre-me.
But your answer now is a good quality, effective multiple vitamin can fill in the gaps of your micronutrients.
Yeah, and I think it's the type of thing that it also, so there's certain things in medicine that we call like diagnostic and therapeutic, meaning that like when you're doing them, you're like, I don't know if it's going to work, but if it does work, then it obviously tells us that's what it was. So for example, you're going to inject somebody's knee joint. They're like, I have knee pain. And it's like, well, I don't exactly know. We're waiting on imaging. But in the meantime, we're going to give them an injection of the knee joint. And if their knee gets better, then we know it was probably just a sprain. And that's all it was. We knocked out some inflammation. I consider multivitamins kind of in that diagnostic therapeutic range, meaning that if somebody's struggling with low energy, poor sleep, poor digestion, for example, because like a lot of the micronutrients influence production of serotonin, like I talked about. Well, serotonin is one of your key regulators of motility in the GI tract.
Mhm.
So if you're constipated, that could be why you're bloated or things like that. So like poor digestion, or you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're wide awake and you're hot and sweaty. Well, that's your blood sugar getting too low. For example, micronutrients would be chromium, selenium. Those things control blood sugar dynamics. So if you start taking a multivitamin and those symptoms start to get better, you are micronutrient deficient, most likely, or some other biochemical cascade has kicked in to offset that. So that's why I always tell people, like, it's probably 30 or 40 bucks a month, $1 a day, but you're going to get way more benefit than you will out of your $3 Starbucks that you get every day. So
You start sleeping. You start sleeping
$3.
better.
What do you get at Starbucks?
I
Water?
don't drink coffee, so I don't know what it costs, but whatever, $7.
Hey, you take people from really crappy sleep to really, really good sleep, and they don't put a price on it.
Correct.
Ever.
Ever.
I love
There's
when people come back to me and they're like, I did not realize how poorly I was sleeping.
I had somebody
'Cause I
once
was
tell me
that way.
they cry less when they sleep better. They're like, what? They're like, yeah, they said, yeah,
Same.
I'm way less emotional when I get better sleep.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, yeah. You ever walk around your whole life tired? You want to cry, miss a
Cranky.
stoplight, you're crying, right?
Mhm.
So they're just like, I'm happier.
I mean, the other thing we need to talk about is the number of young individuals. It tends to be more female than male, but there's even more males now who are being put on them. Mood altering drugs in terms of for anxiety and depression, and the
Mhm.
number of individuals that are getting put on those things. And then think about the cascade that we just talked about: tryptophan, 5-HTP, serotonin, melatonin. Well, we know that in the literature, it just came out 2 years ago, that changes in SSRI, or changes in serotonin levels in the brain, are not correlated with levels of depression. Meaning that as serotonin goes lower, that doesn't mean depression goes higher. We've shown that now in the literature.
That
So,
seemed to be a common thing that people spoke that as truth.
well, correct, because that's the way that these drugs, quote unquote, work. They prevent serotonin from being pulled off the receptor. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, meaning that the enzyme that pulls serotonin off the receptor, we get rid of that enzyme, so then serotonin stays on the receptor longer, so then you feel happier, quote unquote. Well, this is also why these drugs tend to go along with changes in mood and energy levels, and they make you groggy, or they make you an insomniac for some people, because as soon as you start keeping serotonin on there longer, it throws off all those other things that you're feeling. And so this is where we go back to the multivitamin conversation. All of those things influence serotonin production and serotonin breakdown. So, for example, I did a psychiatric rotation at an inpatient psychiatric hospital, inpatient and outpatient. And so the reason I bring this up is, for a lot of the outpatient services, we were talking to all of these people who were struggling with anxiety and depression, and all of these people were medicated. And so one of the interesting things I found was talking with these people. Many of them skipped breakfast, solely relied on caffeine to get going in the morning. And then they also had their worst feelings of anxiety. It tended to be first thing in the morning. And so my preceptor was nice enough to give me the opportunity to kind of talk to these people and say, let's try an experiment for the next 3 days until I see you again. I want you to eat something for breakfast, even if you're not hungry, which again correlates with high cortisol, and that goes along with the high anxiety state. Even if you're not hungry, I want you to have something with carbs, because carbohydrates tend to lower the insulin response because blood sugar stays more stable, yada, yada, yada. You can work backwards from the pathophysiology once you see it, the pattern. That's why I said you don't always have to test, are you high cortisol in the blood? Well, are they anxious first thing in the morning? Okay, that's part of the problem. So we got these people, I was like, eat a banana, switch your coffee for green tea, come back in 3 days and let me know how you feel. Again, it's not going to solve somebody's full-blown panic attacks, but a lot of these people said, yeah, strange. I used to feel terrible driving over here, and I would get so anxious, and I would have to take, I won't get into specifics, but I had to take a medication to help my panic attack on the drive over here. And that's not as bad now. Like, the feeling's still there, but it's getting less over time. Right. And so you're starting to work backwards. And I'm not anti-drug, but what I'm saying is you can do many of the things along with the drug to potentially reduce the amount you may or may not need, depending upon what your physician thinks. And the less you have to take, the less side effect profile. So that's kind of the like paradigm that we're talking about with all of these supplements. They aren't a replacement, but they will likely enhance a lot of things on the side that you may or may not be aware are connected with all the other pieces of the puzzle.
But I think that's the goal too, that we always talk about is, if you're going to take medication or you're going to take supplements, you have to make sure you're doing other things. You have to make sure that you're eating breakfast and eating nutrients and getting your protein in and getting your exercise in, or it's not going to work.
The other thing people should be very acutely aware of is that different drugs cause nutrient depletion. And so there's a free resource. It's called Mytivin, like my vitamin, MYVATIN, Mytivin. You can go on there. You can put in all the drugs you're on, or if it's just one, you can put in the one drug, and it will spit out the exact nutrients that it depletes and the actual studies linking the data showing the depletion. So if you have somebody, for example, on metformin for diabetes, it depletes B12. And so this can cause neuropathy and, tingling and numbness and these sort of things. For example, PPIs like omeprazole, if you take those for a really long period of time, it can cause vitamin D deficiencies, magnesium deficiencies, B12 deficiencies, because you lower your ability to absorb those things in the stomach. So this is just another resource when people are like, well, I take all these drugs, or I take a drug or two, and it helps with X, Y, or Z symptom, and I'm stable, so I don't want to come off of that. Good, you shouldn't. Just double check that you're also not causing something else behind the scenes. And if you are, well, then backfill that. And that's where people can go to, they can look at like RDA values, the relative dietary allowance, how much you should be getting on a daily basis. And that's just a suggestion. This is what in general people need. You asked me the question a while ago, Gray, about how much should I be taking? So for example, let's talk about magnesium as an example, because it's easy and simple. The RDA for women who are non-pregnant, I think, is 320 milligrams. And for men, it's about 400 milligrams. So that's a great starting point for most women. You can start them on a good bioavailable form of magnesium. Normally it's about 2 capsules, and kind of see how they do. You'll know, because the side effect is if you take too much, you get loose stools. If it's a good form, you can take a truckload of it and you probably won't get loose stools. So as an example, if you take mag oxide, 1 capsule, if you're constipated, it works really well. It'll clear things out. But if you take magnesium glycinate and you take 5 or 6 capsules, you're probably going to absorb most of that magnesium, and the body will then either excrete it via the urine, or it will simply push it into the cells if you're really deficient. And so that's where the type matters. And you can also tell based upon your response to it. So we all know when we take too much melatonin, we wake up super groggy and hungover the next day. And so the same thing can be said with magnesium. Certain supplements are things that you want to take every single day. So for example, a multivitamin. Melatonin, like you mentioned, Josh, you don't have to take it every single day. You can use it as needed to kind of bring yourself down off that training high. Well, magnesium can be the same. Magnesium binds to GABA receptors, which are the same receptors that benzodiazepine, like lorazepam, that whole PAM family that people take for panic attacks and those sort of things. The drugs bind to those same receptors with a really high affinity, and they bind to way more of the receptors, but magnesium binds to the same receptors more weakly, and that's why you get the calming effect, and that's why people sleep better. So that's why people love to take it before they go to bed, because GABA is literally the e-brake for the brain. So when people are like, I lay down and my brain just turns on 150 miles an hour, and that's why I can't fall asleep. Yeah, well, this is called sleep anxiety, or anxiety-induced insomnia. And so for these sort of people, you want to give them things that help the brain literally shift into a different brainwave state. When you take magnesium, it shifts you into more of these relaxed brainwaves, these kind of theta patterns of brainwave activity, and that helps to induce sleep. And there's other compounds that do that too. So just as an example with magnesium, if you take 2 and you're like, all right, still can't fall asleep. All right, so that would be then you want to do maybe a drop or 2 of liquid melatonin, just a little nudge, just to see if that makes a difference. If it doesn't, we go up a little bit on the magnesium. Some people, when they get more stressed out, they burn through more magnesium. So maybe you take that person up to 600 milligrams, 900 milligrams if it's a really big male, 1,000 milligrams. Again, people are like, well, it's too expensive. Well, that's true. So do you want Ambien?
We
can go to either
end of the spectrum. We can put you to sleep, bro.
Like, it doesn't matter where you want to go. It's just a question of, does that drug induce a normal sleep pattern versus does magnesium induce a normal sleep pattern? And I will tell you, there's no drug on the market that mimics a normal circadian rhythm throughout the night.
You've said that before. Yeah, there's nothing on the market.
It doesn't exist. It never will exist. There's one drug called, and again, I don't want to talk drugs just legally, but there is a melatonin receptor agonist, meaning that it binds to the same receptors as melatonin. And you can go and look this drug up, but they give it to people for sleep onset insomnia. I mean, you can't fall asleep. Well, you know what else binds to the melatonin receptor? Melatonin. And do you know what else is way cheaper than a drug that has been chemically modified to bind to the receptor?
Yeah.
Melatonin.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's not rocket
Yeah.
science, people.
Yeah.
So that being said, that's where we need to kind of figure out what are things you might want to take every day, depending upon your needs, your diet, what you want to do, your goals. And then what are things that you can kind of use as a stopgap measure. Another example, for example, if you get an upset stomach or diarrhea, activated charcoal works really well. And so activated charcoal is typically given to kids when they go into the ER and they overdose on certain things because it binds to it. And sometimes it'll induce vomiting, sometimes. A lot of people in the medicine community, the medical community, traditional medicine will tell you never take activated charcoal because you'll just vomit it back up. I will tell you, having used it with many, many people, that is not the case.
Yeah.
And I have multiple people that I have used it with. And if my wife, for example, gets an upset stomach, I get an upset stomach, I will take some activated charcoal, because what happens is in the gut, you're making these things called endotoxins. And those things are kind of irritants to the immune system. And then the immune response is what causes you to feel sick. And so when you take the charcoal, it literally binds to those endotoxins in terms of like it has a polarity to them, a charge affinity associated with it. And then as your stool moves through your GI tract, it will stay loosely bound to that endotoxin, and then you will excrete it. But as you remove that endotoxin from the immune surveillance, well, the immune system dies down and you have those symptoms less. So do you take charcoal every day? No. Is it a good thing to have in your back pocket, especially if you have little kids that are puking all over the place?
Yeah.
It
Probably
might not
good
hurt.
idea. Yeah.
It's totally inert. You can put it in water and they'll drink it down, and it works very, very well. So just an example, like there's two sides to this spectrum, and everybody always talks about supplements as my daily stack, but it's like there's things you can have in your back pocket.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I use melatonin like that. Melatonin's in the back pocket, because you're the one that's like, I remember telling you I was taking it every day. I was like, yeah, maybe not. Right?
Yeah.
What good.
I was just gonna say, because I feel like, we know this conversation very well, but somebody who's very new into supplements or new into medication, they're probably feeling very overwhelmed, right? They're like, okay, this is a lot to think about. It's a lot to remember how much I need every single day. What would you tell somebody that's maybe newer or trying to learn about this? Like, what would you say to them as far as supplements? I know we've kind of gone over where we start and stuff like that, but things that are important to monitor maybe.
So I would say two things: start very simple and reach out. So the first is start super simple. If that person doesn't have a good handle on understanding, number one, how to cook or how to incorporate a wide variety of different fruits and vegetables, protein sources, rotate through everything in your diet. And Charles Poliquin talked about this back in the day, that when he would run food sensitivity panels on bodybuilders, they were most often sensitive to the foods they ate the most: tuna, egg whites, oatmeal, all these sort of things. So you need a huge variety and diversity so that the immune system doesn't get used to seeing just one strict thing. And that is a whole wide conversation. So if they don't understand how to cook those things or how to incorporate those things, how to shop for those things, where to find them, I would start there. And if they do know how to do those things, then I would start very simple with foundational multivitamin, and then go back to what's your goal or what are your symptoms.
Yeah.
And if you're like, well, I don't know, I'm just a 20-year-old and I feel fine and I have no symptoms, great. Save money on supplements, take a high quality multi that's filling in most of your gaps. If you tend to be situational anxiety driven person, or you have a high stress job, maybe you add on one or two other things. Maybe you add on a little ashwagandha, maybe you add on some magnesium, whatever it is, but keep the list small, because I will tell you, as you age, the list will grow. And I've seen this over and over and over again. People show up, they're on 20 meds and 30 supplements. And I'm like, this is a full-time job, just keeping up with this.
Right. Yeah.
And you don't know if this is affecting that. Nobody can tell you any of those things. So
you've done consults with people from me before where they sent you their supplement list in the beginning and you cut it in thirds. Like you cut it down from like 10 to 3.
They'll see things and they're like, oh, I need that. And I also need that. And I need this. And then it's like, all right, zoom back out. As a general rule of thumb, if you're taking more than, I would say, 5 or 6 things on a daily basis, then you probably either need a workup and you need to get some blood work with your doc, a general physical, let's see what else is going on, or you need some overhaul on kind of the dietary lifestyle piece of the equation. If you've done all those things and you've had the workup and it's all negative and you still have to take more than those things, then that's the integrative medicine space.
Yeah,
that's where you need to go deeper, and you really need to unpack this, because there's something there, but you haven't found it.
Yes. And people close to my age on TikTok, you don't need to buy the supplements just because they're on TikTok Shop. You don't have high cortisol.
And let's talk about that too, because like you said, I think you mentioned this in another video, Gray, that's trendy. So everybody's
Yeah.
like, we got to keep cortisol as low as possible. Well, I will tell you, there's two main reasons why you definitely don't want to lower cortisol. Number one, are you in a high stress situation? If you are, then that
Should have
cortisol
high
better go up, because I can tell you,
Fight or
having
flight, right?
flatline,
Fight or flight, right?
yeah, having flatline low cortisol, that's correlated with depression. It's correlated
Mhm.
with anhedonia, meaning a lack of apathy, caring about things. It's correlated with a lack of motivation, because cortisol literally is the drive to get up and go. It frees up fuel in your bloodstream so that all the other machinery can kick in and do what it's supposed to do. So if you're driving and somebody cuts you off, I sure as heck hope your cortisol goes up.
Yeah,
Or else you got
right.
a sweet insurance claim coming your way.
That means you're
Second
alive.
thing,
Yeah.
the second thing is, if you're about to give a presentation, or you're about to be quote unquote on sympathetically, you need to be cranked up a little bit. Yeah, your cortisol should go up because it enhances focus and it enhances
Mm.
cognition and it does all these other things. So that's where everything in the human body tends to, there's almost, well, there is this symbiotic interplay with the human body and everything that you see in nature outside. They both function in waves and cycles. And we want to think about them as polarity. It's either on or it's off. And it doesn't work that way. There should be times when it's up and there should be times when it's down. And so we always want to see it as, oh, I got to have mTOR on all the time. That's the major pathway to muscle growth. That has to be high. I have to stimulate it. Well, the opposing side of that is AMP kinase or AMPK. That's where you clear out everything, where you're not eating, where everybody's like, well, if you do cardio, it stimulates AMPK. Well, yes, it also stimulates the removal of dead mitochondria, and it causes the growth of new mitochondria. So if we don't have this adequate balance, I will tell you a lot of cancer metabolism thrives off of mTOR. Why? Because it's growth and reproduction of all cells.
Which connects to heart health, right? AMPK and heart health and smooth muscle tissue and heart health. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
You see it. Well, one of the subjects you're seeing right now is the hormone, the optimizing hormone group, where they're in a real big hurry to find a way to suppress estrogen because their testosterone gets heavy, they have high estrogen, and then they want to kill their estrogen. And then until you start seeing the negatives of not having any estrogen, and you're like, why do my joints hurt? Like all this kind of stuff.
Estrogen is neuroprotective.
Yeah.
So
like you don't want to kill it. Yeah, I mean,
well, but we don't know what like this whole TRT space has been developing for the last 40 years or so. So like when that initial cohort of men now get into their 70s, who knows whether or not there's going to be a correlation with Alzheimer's, dementia, all these other neurocognitive issues.
Heart health, right? High iron, red blood cell counts, right? I want to finish with like 3 questions that are here because I want people to get their questions answered. NAC, N-acetylcysteine. I hear great things. We also read it's best to cycle 8 weeks on, 4 weeks off. What do you know about NAC? N-acetylcysteine. Is that a new thing? I mean, is N-acetylcysteine a new thing?
So no, N-acetylcysteine has been known to the traditional medical community for a while. It's actually what you give people when they overdose on Tylenol. And so they've known about that for a while. So the way N-acetylcysteine works is if you've never smelled it, it's very high in sulfur. And so you'll know it as soon as you pop the cap on the bottle because you're like, this smells like rotten eggs. Well, that sulfur, that sulfhydryl group basically will allow you to make a compound. It's one of the rate limiting steps in making a compound called glutathione. So glutathione is made from 3 amino acids, cysteine, glutamine, and glycine. And so typically cysteine is the rate limiting amino acid, meaning if that one's not there and you have the other 2, the body won't make glutathione.
Got it.
So everybody talks about glutathione more now, at least in the social media space. It's a kind of a immune master antioxidant, meaning it will kind of remove inflammation. It will direct the immune response. It will help with excretion of environmental pollutants, heavy metals, these sort of things. And so you can take glutathione, you can get IVs of glutathione. And so N-acetylcysteine is much cheaper. And so a lot of people will take N-acetylcysteine, and there's some conversations on whether or not that actually raises glutathione. Glutathione's hard to measure in the blood, all these sort of things. To answer the one question, do you need to cycle it? No. You can use it intermittently. It works extremely well as what's known as a mucolytic, meaning if you have a ton of crap in your chest, you can take Mucinex, works well. You could replace Mucinex with NAC. I would never say that. You
Yeah.
would replace a drug with a supplement. I will never say that.
Yeah.
But what I will say is that if you wanted to consider trying NAC, if you had a sinus infection or just congestion, not infection, because you might need antibiotics. I always have to be careful.
Yeah.
So go to your doctor, all of that. If he says it's viral, wait it out, and you still have congestion or you have allergies or those sort of things, or you just get crud in your chest, you're one of those people that just has kind of a nasty cough from time to time when you get colds. NAC works really well as a mucolytic. It breaks that up. It helps you to get rid of that. And you can notice it very quickly within hours of taking it. So it does work super well for that. It also works really well for breaking down what are known as biofilms. This kind of gets into more of the medical side of the equation. I wouldn't encourage somebody to experiment with this, but you may see it in like a gut health product. And it will be put with other like antimicrobials and other herbals that will kill off pathogens. The NAC will assist with dissolving of these biofilms that bacteria will encapsulate themselves in when there's potentially infectious processes going on. So there's some data showing that it helps dissolve that. So all that being said, and that's partly why it helps with the mucus, because mucus can generate biofilms and those sort of things. But all that being said, if someone wanted to experiment with it, they could probably use it more in the acute sense. Or it can also be used in sometimes if folks have, and I have to be cautious with this, if folks have lower white blood cell counts and there's shifts in the immune system, meaning they get kind of stuck in this lower immune response, it is sometimes formulated with other compounds in products that can raise the white blood cell response. All that being said, if you have a low white blood cell count, go to your doctor. It can be very serious things. But if you get worked up and then they're just like, I don't know, it's idiopathic, nobody knows why it's there, but it's just consistently low. NAC is in a variety of products that sometimes will change immune function, and it may or may not shift that white blood cell count.
So overall, NAC could help with the production of glutathione, which can be an antioxidant if you need it.
Correct. And if somebody doesn't have like a known occupational exposure to something, or they don't have like, which again, you're all getting exposed. Like if you aren't familiar with environmental exposure, go watch either Dark Waters, which was a movie that just came out in the last few years about the lawyer that defended the farmer whose entire cattle population was killed by a product from 3M. We talk about PFAS now. I don't know if you guys have seen that. It's getting popular on social media. But they're basically these odorless, colorless, tasteless compounds that they form waterproof coating on things. And so they're also on nonstick pans, so Teflon pans. And basically 3M was dumping these things into the waterways. And so now we find PFAS and PFOAs in the breast milk of 99% of nursing mothers. It's in 99% of all human blood. So everyone's been exposed. It's in all the waters. So if you think you have a low exposure risk with your job, there's tons of things in water sources, even in municipal or well water. And this is a whole bigger conversation, but that's where NAC and glutathione is getting popular.
All right. And we talked about NSF stamp. How much weight does NSF stamp hold on quality, especially for athletes?
Oh, especially
I recommend so I get people ask me supplement questions all the time, kids. I work in an environment where every kid has a parent. Okay. I had somebody tell me if there's anything that a person will become irrational about, it's their kids and their money. Right. So I'm very sensitive when people ask me like, hey, should my kid take this? I said, here's the information, you decide. Right. I do recommend for parents who are looking at supplements for their kids, whether it's creatine or whey protein, to look for an NSF stamp. Is that just good?
I really like that because most of the things on the NSF banned list or the USADA and WADA banned list are going to be compounds that have the potential to really kind of mess up kids' endocrine systems.
Yeah.
And so if they're experimenting with things that may or may not be tainted, I think that's a really quality recommendation to mention it to parents.
Yeah, I do think it's important. I think it's
there's a reason why Thorne is the supplement supplier for dozens of Team USA teams. It's
Yeah.
because they do extremely high quality work, and all the athletes know they can stand behind those products.
It was also a good way. About 4 years ago, there was a rush of high school kids. And I'm quick to understand that what's probably happening in high school kids outside of your environment is probably outside of your control, is probably the same things that are happening under your athletes, under your control. Your kids aren't. So if you're a strength coach out there, or you work personal trainer or work with athletes, don't think it's not happening in your environment, right? If it's happening in other environments, you're not immune to it, right? Vaping was a big thing. Everyone's like, well, oh, no kids here would vape. Man, bullcrap, right? It was a good way to keep kids from going and buying pro hormones by telling their parents to look for an NSF stamp, because no pro hormones had an NSF stamp.
Yep.
So it's just a way for me to kind of protect kids and have parents protect kids, to make sure that if it did not have that NSF stamp, they weren't going to take it.
Yep.
Right. We get this all the time. Obviously, it's still an issue. I get to I'd probably say 50% of my supplement questions I get from people randomly is this question. Does creatine timing matter? When should I take it? I take mine anytime during the day, whenever I remember. Do you have to take it after your workout? Do you have to take it before your workout? And do you have to load it?
Short answer is you probably don't have to load it. You could if you wanted to, but there's a higher chance of GI disturbances.
I've had creatine GI disturbances when
So-
I'm that guy that when the research came out that it helped with sleep and brain function, right? Remember when all that came out? Oh, dude, I was like,
You snorted it.
10 grams, 20 grams. And I'm like, 20, 30 grams. Creatine, not good for me. That hurts my belly, right? But I was
You're
like,
just dry scooping it before
yeah,
bed.
dude, I was just like, yeah, dude, because I was like, brain function's been a big thing for me. And when it came out with like, possible concussions, probably had them, creatine and stuff like that, I'm kind of like, this should be good. I found that 10 grams is my sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
But you probably don't have to load it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Unless you have like an upcoming event that is a very short time period away and you're trying to saturate the amount of creatine you have in your system, you don't need to load it. 3 to 5 grams per day, more on the higher end of that, 5 grams if you're a typically bigger individual, and then 3 grams if you're a smaller, kind of more petite individual. And so, timing, the only thing that's a relative consideration, and the reason why I say relative is it may or may not benefit you, but at least from an understanding of the molecule and what it does, creatine tends to follow glucose in terms of uptake. And so you get your highest glucose uptake after your workout when you're most insulin sensitive. It turns on something known as GLUT4, and it's a glucose transporter. You normally have 1 and 2, GLUT1 and 2 going all the time. And then GLUT4 is the special one that turns on when you're active. So you get a higher uptake of glucose, which makes sense into the muscle because it just removed all of its glucose when you were working out. So that might be a potential benefit. How much would it actually benefit you? I don't know that we would be able to quantify that. And even if you did, it would be very hard to study because there's so many, contributing factors to performance that it's kind of like, was it the timing of the creatine? Was it this? Was it that? I would say as a global recommendation, take it whenever you remember. So if that's first thing in the morning, you're making up a big shaker bottle of whatever, sip throughout the day, throw in a scoop. Probably doesn't matter. When I was taking it, I would take it during my workout with a couple other things that really seemed to drastically enhance the pump when I was working out.
Yeah.
Just an
So
N of
that was
one anecdotal.
creatine, sea salt, coconut water, right?
Oh,
What
the
else?
hydration drink.
What
Pineapple
else did you
juice.
take in it? Yeah, what was the other one? Me and Gray talked about this. What was the other one? Was it
Pomegranate juice.
Pomegranate juice. And
Doggone it.
God, I thought it was a pea.
I
So
almost was gonna
it's
say
carbs,
beet juice.
it's electrolytes, and it's creatine. That's kind of the foundation.
Yeah, I almost thought it was beet juice because isn't there this thing with beet juice for a while?
You can do that
beet?
too.
Oh,
Yeah,
like it looks like a pre-workout.
yeah.
So beet juice enhances nitric oxide production.
Yeah.
Pomegranate juice also enhances nitric oxide because it
Yeah.
has more of your precursors.
Yeah. So does half a Viagra.
Josh.
Well, I actually
Don't
so
tell
it's interesting you
people
bring this
that.
up.
Yeah.
It's interesting you bring this up. I know multiple docs that are working with athletic individuals that will give them the prescription for Cialis or Viagra as a pre-workout.
Pre-workout, yeah, because it increases nitric
Exceptionally
oxide.
well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
I mean, there's
is-
other things that come with it in the gym maybe you don't need, but we don't need to go there. I was going there. I do think this has been a podcast I've wanted to have, or a conversation I want to have for so long, because we all get so many supplement questions. Majority of the supplement questions I get are, in my opinion, are people looking for a short way out. Right? They're looking for that magic thing to kill their appetite, or that magic thing to help them burn fat, or that magic thing to help them sleep. In the end of it, and when we really get down to the nitty gritty, lifting weights, light cardio, eating a large variety of foods, keeping your protein high, avoiding processed foods. A lot of the things we're looking at human beings to find the answers from supplements, they start with those 5 things. Wouldn't you say? Like, they start with that. If you can't solve the issue there, right, then supplements can have a play in obviously all that. If you have a deficiency, you can get blood work. Supplement industry is big money. Man, I don't even want to know what the supplement industry overall worth. Billions of dollars of supplements. We are very trusting individuals that think the D2 we get at Kroger is the same D2 we're going to get from some of the companies that you've recommended, Mike. I think people need to know that. I would love to see every year there's somebody that gets popped because it just doesn't have it in there, right? Or it has more of what's in there. If you're watching this, I want to open this up for people to contact me and Gray. If you have questions, we can try to find answers for you. Most of the questions are, what do you think about this company? What do you think about this company? That's hard because I don't know a lot about those companies, right? I can just tell you the things to be aware of and what to look for. Ultimately, there is no easy shortcut, right? I love your story about the girl that had a hard time sleeping, high stress, hair was, man, when your hair's falling out, you're under some stress. Wanted to get pregnant and you just did 3 or 4 things, lost 20 pounds, felt better, right? That's a great success story. I hope we can all have that kind of impact on people someday. If you are interested in more from Mike, I think give it time. I'd like to do more of these when you're not busy.
Yeah, when you have time for
106 hours a day, 106 hours a week. No, I get it. But I do thank you for coming on. I think there's going to be so many clips we can share with people just to spark their interest. Ultimately, I want people to take control of their own health. I want people to do their own research. I want them to be skeptics of the industry. Where I struggle with supplements sometimes is I do get cynical and think this company, this interest, and I throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like, this industry is so scammed, nothing works. But that's not true, because I do take, so my actions don't speak, because I do take supplements. But I really appreciate you taking your time on a Friday. Just so you guys know, this happened just because we're like, man, Mike, we're on a group text, because we always throw things at Mike sometimes. And he was like, well, I'm open Friday. So boom, it was yesterday.
We were like, thank you.
Yeah, all right. So I really appreciate you guys listening. I think that was a great one on supplements. I appreciate everybody.
Bye.
With all due respect.